Well, hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, whatever your time zone is. Welcome to anyone, wherever you may be, somewhere across our lovely world. Thanks for joining us live here today for the one and only Serverless Office Hours. We are streaming on the AWS Twitch channel, so if you're joining us from there, you are more than welcome. And we're also on the AWS Events channel on YouTube. But I suppose you know what channel you are on. But if you want to swap and change, that'll be good either. My name's Julian. I'm a developer advocate, and I do a bunch of serverless stuff here at AWS. And Serverless Office Hours is when we bring in the experts, and one of our proper serverless experts, and I do say that often, but this is proper expertise. Mark Sales, welcome to Serverless Office Hours. You have been on before in a bit of a different life. So tell people who the awesome Mark Sales is and how you've landed up doing what you do today.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Mark Sales, and I'm currently building my own product, my own company. But previously, about a year ago, I worked at AWS as a software solutions architect, specializing in serverless. And yeah, happily worked at AWS for 6.5 years. Really loved, getting to specialize in serverless and learning all about serverless and how the operating model works and all that jazz.
Cool. Yeah. So if you've done anything with Java on serverless and Lambda, I don't want to pigeonhole Mark because he does a whole bunch of other kind of things, but Mark created some awesome content, and we did snap start, and we did just so much Java stuff, and Java is actually awesome nowadays. Never mind snap start and GraalVM and Micronauts and all the other kind of frameworks. Everyone thought before Java and Lambda, not a great plan together. Nowadays, I don't think that story is accurate at all. So, yeah, plenty of big companies. I was at a slight tangent, but I was talking to someone at a government agency recently, and they were, fully in on Java, doing everything for user-facing APIs for some pretty big UK government services, all running on Java. So, yeah,
it's pretty cool.
Excellent. So Mark, you have, we've got, and as we mentioned, please send us your questions and comments. That's one of the reasons we do Serverless Office Hours live. If you are watching the recording in the future, well, you missed the live questions and comments, but hopefully you'll get it all. And Detox Tech, welcome via YouTube. Mark is here, absolutely. So Mark, you are running a website that you've built where you are all talking about study from experts. So studyfromexperts.com is the URL. So tell us, study from experts, building, surely we don't need to study anymore. We just learn from the AI.
Yeah, I mean, that is a very good point. And what I really want to do is bring expertise from people who have a lot of experience in an area. So we're really focusing on people who are aspiring to be a senior engineer or a staff engineer or a senior architect or a staff architect, and really give them the best learning opportunity that we can possibly do. So we're really focused on, what is the highest return on your investment of time, because these people are super busy. Everyone always is. So how can we impart as much knowledge as possible in the shortest amount of time and have really, really high quality content? So what I found, AI is really good when I'm asking it questions that I have a lot of understanding about, and I'm clarifying and using the AI to clarify my ideas. But if I'm asking about something that I don't know about, I don't know enough to know if it's telling me the truth or not. So in that case, I lean on, I'm lucky, I've got a large network of technical friends, and I can lean on them to kind of help me with technical stuff that I don't know. But for people who don't have that, then we've put together, a really strong selection of people who are building out courses that are specifically, experts in their area. They're well-known names. They've written books. They've done reInvent talks. They're seasoned professionals in their area, and they're looking at, what sort of knowledge that they need to impart on people to help them up their game. AI is everywhere, and everyone will continue to use AI, but there's other ways of learning as well. People use books, people use videos, YouTube, talking to friends, all these different ways. And this is what we think is a really, curated set of just the knowledge that we think is the most important and the best use of your time.
Excellent. So yeah, I mean, our discussion today, I think, is going to be fairly sort of wide ranging, and we're going to cover some kind of things. So we're going to cover how Study from Experts works,
Yep.
what the website is, what it looks like, all that kind of thing. We're going to then, talk about how it was built, and that some of the design choices. There's going to be some architecture, some code, some things in there. And then because Mark is obviously such an expert and he is building with a lot of AI, a lot of what we're going to chat about today is also how to use AI most effectively in any kind of way. And part of it's going to be learning, part of it's going to be building applications, part of it is going to be, structuring things, everything. So yeah, I know this is of a super use for lots of people. So please also send us your questions and your comments if you are watching. Get your questions in specifically about AI coding and architecture and all these kind of things. So Mark, maybe we just start. What does the website look like? How can people sign up? What are you offering? Who's involved?
Yeah, sure. So if we show my screen,
that's me to do.
yeah, this is the website. This is me logged in. It is it's actually really cool even before signing in. But yeah, you can go to the website now. It's fully available. We've got 2 courses available, and the first one is all about serverless, quite pertinent for today, all about integration patterns. And this is by James Easton, who's a fantastic software engineer and architect. And he's done a full 32 different sections all about serverless integration patterns. And you don't need to sign in. Even going onto the website, checking out James's course, you can watch 3 of the modules without signing up or paying anything. So people really like to be able to see what they're getting into before they make a purchase. Totally understand. So we've been able to find a way of de-risking that sort of access from a content and a cost point of view, but still been allowing people to be able to view and get a feel of what the course is like and what James's teaching style is like before purchase. So if I log out and show you the log out, if I jump onto the course, and then I can have a look at all the material, and then I can preview this. Hopefully this is muted. But yeah, without signing in, I can go check out James's course and just see if it's the sort of thing that I'm interested in. And then yeah, if I want to know more, then there's a whole heap of learning material that James has produced. Idempotency, dead letter queues, all the different patterns, inbox patterns, sagas, versioning of events. There's just a lot to learn in this area, and James does a really good job of teaching it.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about the approach is something like serverless integration patterns. It's something really hard to even prompt an LLM or find out what you even need to know, because I code lots of days with AI, and it's all about the syntax, and that's great. Can you create me a TypeScript function or Java or Python, whatever, to do this kind of thing, and it can go and figure that out. I was updating some serverless land patterns, for example, this morning, and was going from AWS SDK, JavaScript SDK version 2 to version 3. One of them was Fargate, one of them was Lambda. It was amazing how it went off. It went and it deployed everything, tested everything, came back with what was wrong, and just kept iterating it, and I just basically clicked on yes. But that's not going to tell me an architecture of a coding kind of thing, and all these kind of things of the different kind of patterns. And people often talk about, all these patterns are complicated for serverless, but you're writing this in a monolithic application anyway. It may just be all in your code. You need queues, or you need caching, or you need things that you often do in memory.
Yeah, I mean, these are all architecture decisions. All of these are trade-offs between what you want and what your preference is. And for us, we're the business is run by myself and Lee Gilmore, who's a serverless hero, and there's 2 of us. So the sort of things that we are looking for from our architecture is absolutely minimal maintenance. As close to zero maintenance as possible, and close to 0 risk from an infrastructure and fault tolerance point of view. We want highly fault tolerant. We don't want to be woken up at 3 a.m. in the morning. We don't want to have to scale the site, anything like that. So we're really looking for low maintenance, very low cost. This is a bootstrapped business that we've bootstrapped ourselves, and this is the first few months of the business. So we're really focusing on costs. And this sort of architecture just leads itself really well. And if we go to an LLM and say, build us an educational portal with these capabilities, it's just too many, millions of possibilities of what you will get. And because we're experienced engineers and architects, we know what we want because we have experience in these areas, and we know what the operational model that we want to have and where the trade-offs are for us. So this is the approach that we've taken.
But that brings up a sort of slightly tangential topic that I'm thinking of is, you've obviously come at this as existing serverless experts. Of course, you're going to use your existing knowledge. If you were Kubernetes experts or on-prem experts or whatever, you would bring that knowledge with you. So that's understandable. But in 2026, how relevant is serverless from two perspectives? One of just deciding an architecture, or when LLMs can spin up everything, isn't it just easier to chuck everything in a Docker container that's load balanced across, I don't know, two AZs, or I don't know, EC2 instances, or even, because lots of people are doing Kubernetes, that's the thing. Before, that was really hard to learn. Services, can be a bit more complex because they're more moving parts. And if an LLM can do all of it, what is the serverless story that actually benefits you in 2026?
I would say this would actually probably be maybe even harder to build if we use Kubernetes, because a lot of the features that we actually use for the website uses a lot of native AWS services. So things like transcribe or media convert, which is the tools that we use to do our closed caption, subtitles for the videos, and the video processing to turn, an enormous 12 gigabyte 4K video into something that we can stream to the website. That's all event driven by nature with how AWS has designed the system. So we're inevitably having to work with the tools that AWS give us as well. So there's a lot of things like that event-driven architecture naturally fits into the AWS platform. And then there are other areas where we know ahead of time. So for example, when you finish a course, you get a certificate. And we know when the person has finished the course because they've watched all the videos. So we can asynchronously generate their certificate, which is actually a fairly, has a certain amount of latency to it. You have to generate the PDF. It's got nice fonts. It's got nice graphics. So if we generated that synchronously when someone clicked a button, there would just be like a delay. So there's a natural amount of optimization and just good customer experience that you can gain by using what is available in AWS and just having like a mindset of, I know when I need to do this, I can do it ahead of time. I can get it pre-prepared. And, a lot of the website actually benefits from that pre-preparedness. We know what we need to do. We do it ahead of time. We have it all cached and static.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're sort of looking for the asynchronicity in wherever you can, and does that decoupling? What are the benefits of that decoupling? I mean, you've mentioned sort of waiting for things to happen, but is it independent scaling? Is it sort of cost modeling? It sounds good from an architectural practice, but I know it can also go wild where you just have everything everywhere. So yeah, how do you think about that from an architecture perspective?
I mean, for us, it's always kind of a customer first approach. So when we're coming up with an architecture or designing a feature, we're not looking to push our preferred way of working. We're thinking, if someone goes to the certification page to download their certificate and then it spins for 10, 20, 30 seconds, it's just a bad feeling. So we wanted that to be available as soon as possible. We know when the customer has finished the course, prepare the certificate, and also we can then, it's an event-driven thing as well, but we can then send them an email to say, congratulations, here's your certificate. If they don't find the web page, we can also send them an email. thank you very much for completing the course. We'd love to hear your feedback. Here's your certificate, and if you'd like to share it with your friends, here's a sharing link for LinkedIn. All these things are just a natural byproduct of the world that we live in, and things happen in a sequence, and that's how you react to them. And it just naturally fits into a Lambda way of working, listening to events, reacting to other things that happen. If I had to make that with an always on system, then I would have a more brittle system. So I'd have to keep track of what was happening. I'd have to have open threads, or I would have to have some other way of tracking that within my application, which would look very much like a serverless way of working, but with different, maybe open source tools instead. So for us, really, it's finding the best customer experience and then find the lowest maintenance way of implementing it, which just happens to be a serverless first mindset, which is what I like.
It's interesting. Yeah, I like the also thinking of deliberately going for a no ops or fewer ops or less bother me in the night kind of scenario, because I mean that's obviously, when you have a small business, you don't want to be woken up at the middle of the night because somebody can't click on James Easton. So it's interesting how that sort of design, well, it's not even a design decision, it's sort of a non-functional requirement, but it's important in your life, and then that goes you down a path of building a decoupled event-driven architecture, and then serverless is a good architectural fit.
Yeah, absolutely. And right now as we're speaking, there will be a spike on the website, and people will be going on and trying things out. And I actually am not worried about this at all, because there's really no scaling activities that I have to think about during the operation of this website. And that is a lot of peace of mind that I have. If someone happened to share this on Reddit and it went wild, then I don't have a worry that we're going to have like a cost inflation or anything like that. I feel very confident, which is kind of new and refreshing.
I mean, are there any trade-offs to that approach? I mean, we're sort of talking about some of the basics of serverless we've been talking about for 10 years, but are there trade-offs in 2026 against this, or cautionary tales, or things to consider?
I mean, there are different approaches to designing systems like this, and there are two people designing this system, and whenever you have two architects, you have two different views. So me and Lee do have different views on designing like serverless architectures. I'm probably more in the microservice world. Lee is very much in the single purpose Lambda function world. So there are a lot of individual Lambda functions, because as much as I like doing a lot of engineering as much as I can, Lee is an incredible engineer, and he has done more of the system than me. So he's taken kind of that approach and has run with it. So there are a lot of Lambda functions. So when you're looking through observability systems, you have to select the right Lambda function, and there is cognitive load on that. Another approach to that could be like a microservice style. So one Lambda function handles all of like a domain. If you're thinking from a DDD point of view, you could have a customer's domain, or a courses domain, or an admin portal domain, and have multiple different things owned by that Lambda function, and have a smaller number of Lambda functions. So we have a lot of Lambda functions. We have a lot of functionality in the website, even after 6 weeks of going live. We've been building it for a while. There is a lot of functionality. There's a lot of Lambda functions. So we do actually lean quite heavily on Kiro to help us write CloudWatch Insights queries, which is really useful for us, and also which are the CloudWatch logs groups that we need to be querying to make sure that we're not querying too much of the system, but also querying the right functions to understand a customer's journey through the system, and investigating why something's happened.
Okay, so a lot of moving parts on the website. I mean, it looks like a website, but behind the scenes there is video storage, and then obviously the whole admin back end of it. If someone needs to upload a video, it needs to be transcribed and stored, and different resolutions and all the kind of things that you just think of video behind the scenes and you don't realize. But I can appreciate it's complex. Plus obviously databases for users and courses and all that kind of thing. So a lot of moving parts. You mentioned Kiro. I mean, how are you working together? How do you, not just from who decides to work on what, but especially when it's AI coding, how do you not trample on each other, or what's the separation, or how are you setting standards? Or, I mean, I know you've spoken about specs before, I don't want to lead the witness, so to speak, but how are you figuring all that out? Because I think that's a common thought for people.
I mean, we are a small team. There's 2 people. So the communication part is super easy. We talk a lot, we do a lot of video calls, we discuss what we want to do. And often we're actually, pair programming, or, actually a 3-way conversation with, me, Lee, and then Kiro. So we have a lot of sessions where we're all coding together. And one thing that's been really interesting actually has been, we started the business in September. Obviously, a huge amount of things have changed since even September last year. And the progression of the models and the way of working from introducing spec-driven development has been really interesting. So we've gone from a world where the AI tools would do completion of a line, or generate a section of code, and really now we're very much leaning on it to help us all the way from the plan stage, design stage. And then, our way of working is to go step by step through the tasks and look at what it's up to. But yeah, me and Lee spend a lot of time on the plan. What is the design aspect that we're thinking about? We iterate with that, and we try and work slowly through the plan, because the system is so fast now at generating code. It's very easy to get kind of caught up with, we need to be as fast as the computer. The computer is really fast, so you just need to keep clicking OK. But I would talk to people and say the code generation bit is fast now. You have time where you can spend looking at the plan and looking at the design. So we have a feature in mind, we talk it through, we start planning it out, we look through the plan document, iterate on that. And same with the design, especially if we're doing like data migrations or 2-part changes. And then we have spent a lot of time on the steering docs, and we have a set of standards, basically like a large company would. We have a set of standards that we want our code and our architecture to follow. So we use that extensively and have honed that over months, so that now when it's generating code, it really honed in and really produces really good output. But that has been something that we've learned and iterated on over months. But now we feel really confident in what we have. So we tried Cursor. Cursor's been really good. We've tried Kiro. And that's what we're using right now to do a lot of our work. And we use a lot of the features of Kiro. So we have hooks that look for code changes, and we update various bits of the documentation. So if it's doing a code change, it will update the comments for that function. It'll also update things like the OpenAPI spec, and some developer documentation that we have as well. So it's doing all those things that you would just become a bit of a pain as a human developer. Oh, I've got to update my architecture diagram, and I've got to update my API specs, and I've got to update these things for every code change that I make. And now a lot of those things can be automated and really high quality.
So you can sort of build that whole, proper software delivery lifecycle in a way into your tools to keep that up to date. I just want to circle back to your sort of planning phase, because I've had sort of some success of, in a way, you also using the vibe coding to interrogate me or interrogate good ideas. I have to build some weird demos of stuff I don't necessarily know well enough. So you guys are the experts, you may know it. But I find myself in the vibe code mode before even doing the plan to say, what are the best ways of doing this? Is there a modern way of doing this? I think this is right. I don't quite understand. How do you vibe the plan before getting into the spec? Well, because it seems as though you're spending more time on the planning. What are the sort of tips and tricks that you have for actually creating effective plans?
Yeah, I mean, when we're thinking about something, we've probably been talking about it for a couple of days. A lot of our ideas come from customers. So, we're in the early stages of the business. We're speaking to, or trying to speak to pretty much everybody who is engaged with the platform and is an active learner. So if you're an active learner, probably thank you for receiving my email and, replying to me. And so, we have this feedback from people and from people who are content creators who are working with us. And, before we even start programming, we're talking about, the ideas and prioritizing them for the benefit of the business. And then, we go through and, we try and take us, use our experience as a software engineer that we're not trying to change the entire website at one go. That's not going to work and it's not going to be helpful. So we are still using a lot of our experience to say, we know that we want to change the data model for this part of the system, but we probably want to do this in two parts. So we're probably going to need to add this optional field, fill in this optional data for the different parts of the data model, and then probably come back and change that from optional to required. So we're still using a lot of our kind of engineering experience to guide it down a solid path. And I think this is where kind of the vibe coding and the spec-driven, there's benefits from understanding a lot of software engineering practices. For vibe coding, very much experimental, but also for small changes. So if I am, trying to explore a behavior that I've seen in our metrics that I don't understand from user behavior, I'll use the vibe code mode because it's just quicker and easier. So I don't need a plan, I don't need a spec, but I might say, I'm seeing this metric. How do we go about understanding the user behavior associated with that? And then I might say something like, create me a CloudWatch Insights query to try and understand this behavior across these Lambda functions. And I might, look into getting to generate me some SQL. So we store quite a lot of information in Aurora DSQL. So I'll get it to do, queries of our kind of where we store more of our long-term storage. So we use DynamoDB as kind of a one type of storage, and then we do more queries on our Aurora DSQL. So vibe coding is really for that kind of backwards and forwards, understanding user experience and doing a bit of debugging.
I suppose that's the operational aspect of it as well. It's not actually necessarily coding to build the site. This is the operational.
Yeah, and it's really good for that. It is really cool for that because you can hook it up with all the tools. So if we've been planning something on GitHub, then we can pull in that information using MCP, and that is just a fantastic aspect as well. Being able to integrate with the different tools and have like a much more joined up experience. So it's been very different. If I think about my career in computing, which is like 20 years, in the last 6 months, my experience of how to develop software has just changed remarkably.
So how do you avoid getting drowning in markdown documents as well? Because I know there are two things from the question. Some people I talk to say, I get drowned in, I get overloaded in markdown documents, and I know I don't need to read them, but the agents are going to read them or whatever. And then in the spec mode, it seems crazy to have to define everything up front. And then, yes, I'm going to iterate through the design and the design requirements and tasks. But doesn't that just get hugely unwieldy for a big site? So how do you not get drowned in markdown documents? And then, do you have multiple specs or nested specs, or how does that sort of fit in when you're building this kind of application?
Yeah, I guess we've fairly split out specific specs. So, our preferred way of working in software engineering is hexagonal architecture. So we have ports and adapters, and we have use cases which store the business logic. And this allows us a certain amount of portability. If in the future we need to move from Lambda, we can move to a containers platform or something else if we need to. So we have a steering doc which talks about hexagonal architecture, like our expectations and examples of hexagonal architecture. And we have an API standard that we want it to conform to. So the steering docs are very split into specific architectural, I guess, design concepts. So we're not really like going back on them and editing them a lot. Once we've seen that maybe that was a deficit when we tried to do something. Why is it done as something like that? Or we would much prefer it if it did this. Right, add that to a steering document and have that steering document to be, specific to a certain thing. And then, we have a more general steering doc, which is more about the kind of customer experience and other things. But a lot of the architectural guidance is in specific steering docs.
So you have less, from the sort of overall architecture, you actually have less in the design and the spec-driven development part, and have that more in sort of guiding steering docs that those then specs pull in to build kind of things. I'm sure a lot of those would be generic thing like full types wherever. You're not going to put that in every single plan or every single spec. And so the overall steering doc will have that kind of thing, but then each microservice or each something would have then its own design requirements and tasks for that, but pulling in a more general spec. Is that how you do it?
Yeah. So when we're talking about a new feature, I mean, Kiro just knows the expectation that we have on it and how to build systems. So, it's going to be API gateway if there's a public endpoint or a private endpoint. It's going to be Lambda for all of our business logic. It's going to have certain patterns that it adheres to. We use outbox patterns. We use, different ways of working. So when we're planning, we're really planning the feature and how it will work on the website and using the domain language of the website. So when it comes to the design, it just knows a huge amount about what's expected already. We don't have to tell it to, use hexagonal architecture or, create a repository for this. It's just kind of, it knows. And also it's got the full code base. So, when we were starting out, this was a lot more iterative, and we were seeing things that weren't how we expected. But now it's got the full code base to look at. So we can say, we want this to be similar to the email service, or we want this to be similar to the notification system. And we can draw upon that experience to kind of guide the next set of features. And that is, it's also similar to what you would say to a junior engineer. If you were building a team of people and, you wanted to give a junior engineer a task, it's much better to say, have a look at this thing that we've built over there. That'll give you a good idea of, what we want you to produce. And I try and think of it like that, in that, all of the things that we used to do as good teammates and help people, come along on their career, architecture diagrams, how does things work, operational run books. These are all artifacts that are really useful for humans. It is also really useful for AI as well.
Okay. I know we're going to look at the architecture diagram, but just before then, the actual creation of those steering docs, you said it was an iterative approach. I mean, where do you start? I mean, are you using AI to create those as well? Have you got an existing code base? You say, well, Lee brings his code base and says, this is what good looks like for me. Mark brings his code base and sucks it all in. Or are you handcrafting your steering documents? How does that even happen?
Yeah, so for those who don't know Lee is a fantastic serverless hero. He has been an incredible engineer for a long time. He's written a lot of material on his newsletter called the Serverless Advocate. He has a lot of material from years of working in this area that he's drawn from. So he has a lot of blogs and examples and other material. So, when we started down this path, we had an idea of what we wanted. We have strong opinions on how systems should be created. So yeah, we knew we'd have to write, some of it out, but also there's just a lot of material that we kind of had as seasoned professionals in the area. Unfortunately, it's probably not what other people want to hear, but yeah, we had a lot of that from being software engineers for like 20 years.
But I think what's going to be interesting is, a lot of those best practices and the kind of things are going to be just available via skills and powers and MCP servers and all those kind of things. So, I think we're getting to where the best people's best practices can become hugely scalable.
Yeah, and that's still down to choice, right? Best practice for one person is not best practice for another. What's best practice in the banking industry is going to be different to a startup. So still being able to understand, the choices that you're making, I think are really important. But yeah, the democratization of how to build highly scalable, fault-tolerant systems is becoming easier and easier, which is fantastic.
Cool. Yeah, we did have some questions when we were talking before about the operational aspect of it as well. Yeah, Detox Tech, thanks for coming on YouTube. Was just asking, are you any thoughts of using the DevOps agent or other kind of agents?
Yeah, absolutely, and also the pen test agent.
Yeah.
I mean, for us, as a bootstrapped business, having a fixed cost pen test that is available within the AWS console is a really, really interesting idea. We've done some of our own pen testing, but obviously it's hard to evaluate your own code base. So, things like that and the DevOps agent are definitely interesting to us. We want to keep the business as lean as possible for as long as possible. So if we can lean on tools to help us do that, absolutely. But at the moment, it's finding that balance between cost versus benefit.
Cool. And yeah, NBL 23, and also interesting tangent. How is this way of development and building applications going to change our company's interview and hire in the future? Will companies focus on how you write code or steering documents?
I mean, I definitely would. I mean, that's part of the job. So if you're interviewing somebody and asking them to write you an application as part of the interview, I think you need to assess how and what tools they use. And I think that's just part of the evolution of the industry. I remember doing an interview and them interviewing me on paper, and giving me a set of code and me writing out the answer. I was just like, this is crazy. You're testing my memory instead of how I use my tools. Yeah. So I didn't have an IDE. I didn't have Google search. So that it's just going to hamper me. It's not a useful interview technique. So I think we need to evolve our interviews as well. So if people are doing practical code, I want to be pairing with them. I want to be acting as the product owner or an architect, and I want to be doing the work with them and seeing how they approach the problem. This isn't about leak code or fixing memory tests. How do you reverse a string? How do you do this sorting algorithm? That's not of any interest to businesses.
Yeah, it's going to be super interesting. Just how you're going to hire people doing an interview remotely. Wondering, are they cheating because they don't know their answers? But then also wanting to discover, well, how are you going to use AI to actually get the stuff you don't know? Yeah, that's going to be super interesting to see how we.
Absolutely.
Should we have a look at the architecture, because you have some interesting design decisions, and we've been chatting awesomely about all the code kind of things, and but let's have a look at just walk us through the architecture and some interesting design decisions you may have made. And
sure. So hopefully you can see this. So if you're building a site like this, some of the decisions are, and some of the things that you have to deal with are kind of awkward. So if you're dealing with 4K video, these things are enormous, You know, you can accidentally make, you know, a 15 gigabyte file from a 20-minute video. And, you know, the content that we have on our website, we try and be bite-sized. We try to make them focused so that you can skip to the bits that you're most interested in. So our videos are between, you know, typically between 10 and 20 minutes long. But yeah, you have to deal with, you know, how do you upload a 15 gigabyte file? So yeah, we lean heavily on S3, and in particular the multi-part upload capability of S3. And you know, I've never had a problem uploading a file. and that's just fantastic. So you know, uploading a 15 gigabyte file is just super easy, and it lands in S3, and then immediately you're into, you know, a world of event-driven architecture. You know, you can have a notification from that bucket straight onto Amazon SQS, and then yeah, the easiest way to read from SQS is with a Lambda function. So you know, you get a reference to the object that's been uploaded, and then you can, you know, send it through to transcribe, and you know, put the output of that transcription into S3 bucket, and it's available for all of our customers to see the transcriptions for people, because we know that we have customers in 11 different countries, and a lot of people aren't native English speakers. So we know, and we knew straight away that we needed to have closed captions and subtitles available for people so that they could best learn from the material. And yeah, we emit events after work has been done, and then it just means that the natural flow is just easy. So you know, after transcription, we then send the video to media convert, which is just a dream. It's absolutely fantastic. You know, if you're doing anything like this, just being able to send a humongous media file to media convert, and it just being able to produce all of the streaming files and the manifest, you know, within a few seconds, is just incredible. You know, having to provision infrastructure to do that, and actually, you know, even with AI to do that yourself would just be way more effort than it's worth. So we probably spend something in the order of $10 to do all the transcriptions and all of the media convert for an entire course. So maybe wow. 4 hours of material, and it's just so cost effective. It's just fantastic, and having to do that ourselves would be a pain. And then also, because we might be changing videos as people are making edits and revisions, we also have another Lambda function that listens to completion events, and then we can invalidate the cache into CloudFront so that customers immediately get the updated version of the file. And that's something that just happens over and over again throughout the website, is that we want to heavily cache the website so that it is as responsive as possible, but also sending, you know, gigabytes of video file across the web could be potentially very expensive. So we have to really be mindful of making sure that we cache as much as possible, but also, again, we want a really good customer experience, and we don't want to make it hard to debug what's happening. So we do a lot of very specific invalidation of the CloudFront cache.
Cool. Erie Edits actually asked, do you store the original 15 gig file once converted, or is it deleted?
At the moment, we do. I mean, there might be a case in the future where we store it somewhere else, or store it for long term in case we want to come back to it. But 15 gigabytes is not really a big deal on S3. So at the moment, it's part of the cost. But at the moment, I see value in keeping it, so I'm keeping it for now.
Cool. And I suppose you're not sending out that 15 gigs to all your subscribers anyway. So
no, that's the great thing about streaming formats, and especially people on lower quality internet connections or lower bitrate connections, that it automatically finds a suitable bit rate, and you're only sending chunks of the video at a time. You don't have to go on the website and wait for it to download 15 gigabytes. It's just not going to happen. So it works really nicely, and Media Convert just kind of handles all that for you, and it's really fantastic.
So because because I'm not actually, I haven't used Media Convert that much. So that converts it, puts it in another S3 bucket, and then are you sort of streaming those videos directly from S3 to your clients, or via some cache as well?
Yeah, so that's where there's like a bit of security involved, because obviously we want to make sure that only people, certain people can access the material. So we have a pre-signed URL Lambda function that produces a URL that you can access the course streaming video from. And obviously that is important to us. But yeah, once you've got that pre-signed URL, you basically point the media player at the manifest file, and then the manifest file knows where all the different video segments are and when to kind of go fetch more. And it's a really cool kind of open source project that everyone can use. And
cool.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have liked to have made that from scratch, whenever it was made, but nowadays it's a solved problem, which is fantastic.
Cool. What next is of cool interest?
Yeah, so I mean, I mentioned the certificate service earlier, and just as a really kind of nice improvement to the customer experience. So, we have certificates. People like certificates and be able to be proud of the work that they've done. And this was just a really neat way of implementing this. So we use EventBridge extensively. We have domain events, so events that are specific to our business and a business functionality. And we know when someone has completed a course. So we have an event that says you have completed a video, and we have a Lambda function that looks at all of the video completions. And if someone has completed an entire course, we emit a course completion event. And then this is the one of the consumers of that. We can now asynchronously, without the user knowing, consume that message, do some PDF generation, again put that in S3, ready to be consumed when the customer finds it, or when they find the link in an email that we send to them. So just a fantastic way of decoupling a new feature. So this feature doesn't touch any of our existing architecture. All we need to do is build a new consumer, and we can add this feature and toggle it on and off. If we find that actually it's no value, we can turn it off quite easily, but we don't have to risk the rest of the application. So if we built this capability within a single monolithic application, or within a larger application that was deployed on a container service, then there would be an inherent risk that something here would affect something else. But having it designed like this means that we can move very fast and be very confident that what we're adding is all additive and not going to break the system, which is fantastic.
Also spotting that you using SQS a lot, so you're not just doing EventBridge directly to Lambda, for example. I mean, is that your good architectural pattern to have that store of something? So if your Lambda function goes down, you've just got that extra bit of redundancy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're just understanding that there will inevitably be failures, and they're usually transitive failures. But there inherently are going to be failures in services, and just being able to have those retries ready, and not just have broken bits of the system, or weird spurious errors that you have to go, so this failed because there was an error here, but all we needed to do is just to retry it, and then it would have worked. So this just inherently adds all of that behavior.
I mean, do you ever actually get much stuff in your DLQs, or just with the reprocessing of SQS?
Why would you ask me that, Julian? Yeah, touch wood.
Exactly.
Not yet, but we have the alerts on those, and they come to us specifically. So if there is a behavior that's newly exhibiting and messages are going onto the DLQ, we'll know about them, and that's on us to fix, because they will be legitimate errors. And I guess it was very similar to when we started adding Slack notifications. So as we were preparing to go live and welcome customers to the website, we do need to know about things that are happening. And again, very much like the certificate service, we were able just to add Slack notifications super easily because we already had all of these domain events that were being emitted by the system. Again, I know it's kind of boring, but it was very easy to add another kind of capability to the system by just having another consumer of our EventBridge custom event bus. And we listened to specific domain events, and we were able to, craft specific messages and then emit them to Slack. And from a new business point of view, it's really cool to see who's signing up, who's buying, what behaviors they're having on the website, if they're having any problems, if we're emitting errors or DLQ systems are firing. It's good to know about that and hear about it in real time instead of
So you're using Slack. So I see you're using SES, but you're not actually sending it to email. You're using the sort of what are the A2?
Yeah, it's an integration method. It's just a super easy integration method. But I'm sure there are other integration methods. That's ended up being the easiest one for us because we had SES set up.
Cool.
And I guess this comes down to being just a really fantastic way of building, because we've been able to build this basically on a daily cost of less than typically less than like $2. And if we've got more traffic one day, then we have a slightly different cost base, but our cost is proportional to how much people use the system. So if we've got more customers, it means they're buying more courses and watching more courses, and our costs go up. But this is how I would want my system to behave. And yeah, typically we're happy to pay $1 for all of the capabilities in WAF. WAF does an amazing job of keeping the website kind of safe and protected. And CloudWatch is how we do all of our alarms, all of our monitoring, all of our observability. We use X-Ray for all the tracing. And it's just a really neat way where we've not had to do a lot of work for like dashboarding or alerting. It's all kind of been done in CDK constructs, and it's been really easy to kind of build.
So it's interesting that literally most of your cost is protecting the front door with WAF, and then understanding your application with all the CloudWatch stuff, and actually the whole application that delivers all the value to your users is a rounding error.
Yeah, and this has always been the way in my career as a solutions architect, that Lambda is a rounding error, and it's an incredible system. The lack of maintenance, the availability, the fault tolerance is just incredible. But yeah, on the bill, it will never turn up, and I can't imagine how much traffic we'd need to serve in order to for it to be the same as WAF. If Lambda functions are 1 million invokes for like $5, it will take us a while, and hopefully the business will be doing well enough to pay for the Lambda bill.
Yeah. And I suppose then people spend a lot of time optimizing their costs on the Lambda side, which can be super beneficial, especially at scale. But yeah, from an architectural design perspective, there's work to look at CloudWatch as well and decide how much you're logging, and debug logging, and all the kind of stuff which you don't think is necessarily going to add up, but it can do.
Yeah, and from an architecture point of view, again, we're serverless first mindset, but also the best experience is just not calling any compute at all. So we're very much thinking about, before you sign in, we don't know who you are, we don't know what your malicious intent is, so we just don't do dynamic calls. We don't have a lot of dynamic functionality.
So you can have your website completely static until someone actually signs in.
Yeah, so if we get a load of bot traffic or something like that, it's not actually going to incur a lot of costs. Once you've signed in, and obviously signing is through Cognito, and you have to validate your credentials, then the website is more dynamic because we can be more trusting of the traffic, and we want to give a better experience to the customer. But yeah, we can very much segment the traffic, so not everyone is just not every page refresh is just going to generate, a cascade of thousands of Lambda functions.
Oh, cool, interesting. Yeah, no, that's a good way to think about it. I know something else. We did talk about the operation side, but I know when we'd spoken before that you sort of had, you've got AI generated code and the sort of debugging part of it. Yeah, well, I mean, we haven't got that much long, but how are your thoughts on that? You talked about the operational side and all the CloudWatch metrics and all that kind of thing, but from a sort of debugging perspective, is that part of it, or is there more to the story?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even with a code base of this size, if there's bits that Lee has written that I'm less familiar with, I'm definitely going to lean on Kiro to kind of help me. So I'm trying to think of things that have happened recently. But yeah, what happens if somebody pauses the web player and then goes off for 2 days and then unpauses? I didn't write that part of the code, so getting Kiro to help me out and get up to speed as soon as possible, that's been really helpful. So yeah, just learning and getting up to speed as soon as I can just means that we can spend as much of our time like improving the platform and kind of, instead of focusing on which bit of the system and does this really do that bit or what, just time saver, real time saver.
And then the last thing, I'm sure also a lot of the learnings that you're building over here, specifically those steering files and even some of those designs and everything, are so portable and so useful that the next project you bring in, you haven't even got that learning of what the stuff that's in your brain is already in Markdown, and off you go.
Yeah, very much so. And we really want to concentrate on this as the business idea that we really are super passionate about. But yeah, you could imagine reusing a lot of these components, and especially the approach it's all systemized already. So yeah, it's I think a lot of people have found like a renewed passion for building, because it's a lot simpler to do one aspect of it, which is the typing. The typing is a lot quicker. So yeah, if you've got ideas that you've been thinking about for a while, and you can express those as a business, then the kind of typing and code generation part is a lot easier than it used to be.
Cool, excellent. Well, Mark, thanks so much for your wisdom. I think it's fantastic. Super good luck with the platform. Please sign up. I mean, the fact that you've got Mark Sales, even Lee Gilmore, Lee Gilmore, and even James Eastham. I mean, these are proper service experts. If there are 32 videos from James Eastham, and this is stuff that, as I said before, an LLM isn't going to grab quickly for you. These are fundamental concepts, not just of serverless, but of cloud computing. I think you can do yourself a world of good to understand those fundamental concepts, and then you throw them at your LLM to build your things. So good luck with building. Study from the experts.com. And yeah, this is sort of one of a few episodes we planned of Serverless Office Hours coming up in the future. Just talking to practitioners using AI to build coding, understanding what they're doing, tips and tricks, because I think we're all scrambling. I think we're all trying to discover best ways of doing things, and we vibe coding and spec coding as much as we can. And I think we all need some help with that as well. So Mark, thanks so much for coming on Serverless Office Hours, and we appreciate all the work and the hard work you're doing. And Lee, when you do watch this in the future, hopefully you do do Mark's performance review. He did a great job. So thanks to everybody. Thank you, Mark, most importantly, and everybody. See you same time, same place next week. Bye-bye.